All right, everyone. It's really nice to have you all here. This is my first time as a speaker on such conference, so I'm kind of stressed. But here's the deal: I'm gonna not stutter, and I'm gonna try to be smooth and pretend everything is all right, and you're gonna try not to notice. Also, because of that, I will really appreciate your feedback regarding the flow, the content. What was your reception of my my talk exactly? So let's start. Very basic agenda. Short introduction. Who am I and why am I speaking about this subject? What is LARP? Because maybe some of you are familiar with the concept. Some of you probably you're maybe even LARPing, but there is a lot of different communities. I will go to this later. Comparison between NPCs and players in video games and LARPs. Types of NPCs, those are like my original definitions. And the whole bread and butter, so actual tools for designing better NPCs. Nope, no. I think I don't know where should I. Yeah, all right. So, what is LARP? This is like live-action role-play game. This is the form of entertainment when people are role-playing characters. They're pretending to be someone else. They have to pursue goals within the within the fictional setting. But this setting, unlike the pen and paper RPGs, is represented by actual physical environment with which you can interact. Also, the outcome of player actions, they may be, and they usually are, mediated by game rules, or are consensually declared and played out by players. Very basic life typology. There's a lot of scenes. There are American LARPs. There are so-called buffer LARPs. There is a European battle LARP stage. There are so-called Nordic LARPs and Asian LARP scene. And all of these types of LARPs, they are very, very different things. And these types of LARPs, they differ in terms of level of immersion, the level of rules, how heavily they are acted out. Maybe they are improvised. Sometimes there are scenes which are previously agreed between players. And it's very important to note that in this talk, I'm going to talk only about European Battle LARP and Nordic LARPs, since those two are ones which I experience and play out, both as player and as NPC. All right. I think we skipped who am I, so maybe I will introduce myself without the without my missed slides. Sorry. So very briefly, we've got some technical issues. My name is Aleksandra Sokólska. In terms of video games, I've been working in the industry for 6 years, and mostly I work in indie game dev, which means I was wearing many hats. So during this time, I worked as a game designer, as a level designer, as a quest designer, as a narrative designer, and also as a writer. I also did some things connected with accessibility in video games. Currently, I work as a narrative designer in Flying Wild Hog, and my background is in the film industry. I graduated Kieślowski Film School, and by education, I'm a film producer, and I recently returned to my alma mater, and I'm a lecturer teaching basics, introduction to game dev for people from outside the industry. In terms of LARPs, I've been LARPing most of my life. I counted yesterday that for 18 years of my experience, I played over 300 LARPs, on which I impersonated over 250 characters. I also were designing, and I'm still designing games, both small ones, big ones, different types of them. And I think in total, until this day, I designed over 40 games of a different size. And Also, I wrote over 300 character sheets, which are, in LARPs, this is like the basic handout for player. So if you want your player to know what they're about to do, you're writing character sheet for them. Sometimes it's co-created, so I have to design it based off their preferences. Sometimes it's entirely up to designer what the character is, what they are doing, how they are presented in the world, what is their connection. And since this year, I'm also working with LARP Venture, which is a AAA company producing commercial LARPs. And I'm working there as a producer and as experience designer. Sorry for technical issues once again, but we will continue. Thank you. All right. So, the NPCs. Basically, all characters which are not controlled by the player. And as you can see, there's a bunch of differences between them in video games and in LARPs. The most important one is that the NPC in games is like a digital entity, which is designed, pre-designed by the team, and quite often a bunch of teams. So it's like collaborative effort. And they are limited only to the actions which were previously designed. So the NPC in video games will always follow the script. They're never going to improvise unless it's a bug. They will always do what was pre-written for them. Nothing can surprise them. They will always perfectly perform in front of everyone. But on the other hand, there is no connection in the both ways. Like the NPC is like a digital thingy, and when the game stops, it's not existing as well. While in LARP, NPC is an actual human, and this person is briefed to deliver the best experience to the player. And my role as an NPC is to be sure that I'm enhancing the game of the players, that I'm following the rules, I'm following the script, the design, the desired quests, activities, relationships, etc., which will make games for players better. But on the other hand, I have to always react with the players, and the most rewarding thing, which taught me a lot, is I instantly see what they are doing, what they are their reactions, but I also have to improvise. And many, many times, things were surprising me. Something broke, was not working as it should be, someone was late, we forgot the most fucking important artifact somewhere over there on stairs, and you have to improvise how to make this scene cool for players with the things you have right now here with you. But also, you can interact with players and other NPCs after the game or during the game, which means you constantly, of course, if you're looking for it, getting feedback. So they can tell you what they like, what they didn't like, what was cool. Maybe they were looking for other experience, or maybe they were craving for more. And it was the most insightful thing which I learned from being an NPC. So this constant feedback, the possibility to discuss our expectations and how they were executed, this is like the thing on which my whole talk is based. Because I'm also playing as a player, but those things are absolutely different kinds of experience. When you're a player in LARPs, well, all players are main characters for their story. So you've got between, I don't know, 15 to 200 main characters. And NPCs are for all of these characters. Your role is to support them all. Your role is to enhance their experience, provide them fun, but also keep an eye for breaking the rules, all the safety issues, etc., etc. If we're talking about players, when I'm playing video game, I'm only interacting with the controllers. And my interaction with the world is limited by the design delivered to me from the game developers. Sure, I can smash the controller, I can start shouting, I can express myself, but the game is not going to react to it. Also, I can only deliver feedback after I stop playing the game. So I can write a complaint, I can write a bad review, I can even approach developers. unless it's like, you're not taking part in playtests, but this is entirely different and very specific situation. While when you're talking about players in LARPs, first, they always have to act out and react and interact to things which are happening during the game. They're impersonating the character. They are not animating the avatar. So they put a lot of effort in creating costumes, special effects, makeup, to the way they speak, they move. Same for the NPCs, but we've got different goals in mind. They want to have fun. We want to create understandable idea of the NPC for them through the same matters. Also, the third point is that they can't pause or reload game. There is the appendix, because it only matters in terms of accidents, some miscommunication, there are some issues. Because sure, you can pause the LARP, you can always so-called opt out, so just leave the scene, maybe it's too much for you, but those are rather safety measures. It's not like, I'm bored, I will stop it and return to it an hour later. No, in hour, the prince may be killed, or maybe your wife don't love you anymore, because it's like, LARPs are also super, super intensive. This is like the very, very concentrated reality. It's not like reality itself. No one's gonna play romance for 3 weeks to get on a date, but we're all gonna believe that, yeah, it could happen in 3 hours, because we're here to have fun and to create memories, to have adventures together, and to experience the world. I need a water, but I'm back in a second to you. Yeah, and the last point, which is also important, players in LARPs, they can give you feedback very directly and immediately. Sometimes you're teaching them something, you're giving a speech, and you can see that they are not acting out, that they are bored. They are bored. They don't like your performance, they don't like the way you're doing things, and it's also a message for you. So if you're an observant NPC, you can learn from their reactions that, all right, maybe it wasn't the best idea to make it that way. And it's always good to later on deepen this kind of feedback by talking with them, by exchanging experiences, by collecting so-called feedback forms from NPCs, from players after the game, because it all helps you learn and design better games, better NPCs, and more memorable experiences. Few disclaimers. Sure, there are no universal rules for designing an NPC. It's not like it fits all situations. Maybe your game is not like heavily NPC-driven. Maybe you need a specific kind of NPCs, and for example, rules regarding romancing or conflict are just not applicable for you. So chances are that not all of my tips will work for your game and for your design. My tips are mostly applicable to narrative and quest design. First, because those are like 2 areas in which I feel like most skilled and experienced, and also because I have some idea how concept art work, but I believe that we have much more experience and suitable people to tell you about concept art for NPCs, or animation, or voice acting, stuff like that. So most of my tips, they're gonna focus on these two departments. And they are only tips based on my LARP experience, so maybe if you're LARPer too, or maybe if you heard stories, you may have different experiences, and I'm very, very gladly share them later on. But those are things which I experienced, which I figure out, sometimes the hard way, and which are working for me to delivering both better experience for players as an NPC on LARPs, and they are working for me as a designer, so whenever I'm stuck or I approach specific design problems, I have some tools in my box already, which worked for me before, and they will be applicable in the future. So, what I have learned from nearly 80 years of LARPing. The most important thing is what people look for in NPC, because if you've got an NPC in the game, in most of the times this is like the first bridge between the player and the game. Sure, we're experiencing the environment, the game world through other means of expression, through other assets, through the cinematics, through music. All those things are enhancing and creating the overall experience. But if your NPC is somehow, its design is somehow connected with NPCs, and they are important for it, chances are that for player, the NPC is the first person to whom they will go when they are lost, when they are bored, when they are looking for a quest, when they are looking for support, because this is like very human thing. I'm looking for another human being, another person. Sure, I can read a book, but book not always is gonna be entertaining, and the person is. And those are things which works from my experience, and if you're gonna divide those needs which NPC is fulfilling for player, you're gonna split them in these 4 categories. So people are looking for engaging story. And it means all the backstory of the character. Maybe some bits about your character, if it's this popular insomnia, I don't know who I am, trope. Those are all the lore bits, those are all the stories within stories, whatever's connected with narrative itself. Then is gameplay facilitation, which is all the things connected with how NPC is changing, supporting, or influencing the gameplay. Are they teaching you a skill? Are you delivering you an item which is switching the experience? Are they, I don't know, maybe they are a kind of gating mechanism to one area because you can only enter it with the NPC. So whatever is connected with NPC changing the gameplay, I put in the gameplay facilitation. Guidance is something between tutorial and showing you how the ropes work in the game. So it can be something between, hey, adventurer, I see you're lost, but I heard there is this very interesting thing going here and there, and by the way, you're looking like a guy who would need a new sword, because this game is about swords, and you missed the first quest when you're gonna get the sword, so I'm here just to ensure that you're gonna get the sword. It's also about being like what I called like a tutorial, so NPC could like very seamlessly explain to you how to play the game, and point you when you're locked in a quest, in a story, in a gameplay. And the last thing is relationships. And I think it's like pretty self-explanatory. Pretty self-explanatory. What is your character feeling to the NPC? What is NPC's reception of you? And how does it all impact the game, the story, the gameplay, etc. And based on those things, I've got my own personal definitions for NPCs regarding their purpose in the game. So you can see them here. It's a narrative-driven NPC, gameplay-driven NPC, and multi-purpose NPC. And from my experience as a game designer and as a LARPer, the best option ever to have is to have as much multi-purpose NPCs as you can. Why? Because we've got different play styles. So you may have players who are more engaged and more interested in following the gameplay bits. They won't fight. They won't, I don't know, improving the systems. They want to focus on how the all gameplay loops works. And you may have people who are more focused and more driven by narration. And I believe that, for example, Hades and Games for Supergiant did it very well, that NPC is both a gate through which you can gain some access to gameplay-driven elements. It's giving you boons, you can give them something, they can unlock you new skills. But also, if you're not gameplay-driven person, if you're looking for the story, there's this another layer of attractiveness in getting more and more familiar with the NPC, in getting known the story, but they are very, very seamlessly connected together. So no matter what's your preference in terms of playstyle, you can approach nearly each NPC both ways. And since NPCs are quite often very, very expensive, and unless you're like triple or fourth A or whatever A, you can afford too many NPCs. And it's very, very profitable for you to have one design, one person who's combining as much facets of these purposes in one character, because you're saving money on animation, you're saving money on models, on voiceovers if you have any, and basically in production-wise and budget-wise and time-wise is much more profitable for everyone. So, narrative-driven NPCs. If we take these four ingredients of a good NPC, of what people are looking in NPC, they are most likely to have very, very big impact and very big focus on engaging story, being their backstory or their relationship with the world. Maybe they are selling you some lore bits, maybe they are teaching you about the world itself, but everything is story-driven. It's not how to, I don't know, be more profitable or kill more goblins in a minute. It's about how we have goblins in the very first place 300 years ago. And also, quite often the very important part of the design is relationship, because it's also story-driven, it's creating different kind of emotions, and basically, come on, most of us, we really, really enjoy getting in relationships, friendships, romances, whatever, with our NPCs. They hardly ever or never get any gameplay facilitation. It's not their purpose. They are here to tell you about the story, the lore, to be romanceable. They don't need anything extra, but they may have some parts of the guidance. They may point you here and there. They may be what I call like storytelling type of a tutorial, so they may present to you how to play the game, but in an entertaining and very seamless way, which is not breaking the immersion. Then we've got gameplay-driven NPCs, and as you can see here, the situation is quite the opposite. They are mostly focused on gameplay, so those are, for example, vendors, those are people who are teaching you new skills, those are companions, but in terms of I'm gonna join you in a fight and support you companions, so they are actually changing the gameplay, and quite often they've got very strong purpose in guiding you through the game, since let's go here, let's do that, I've got this thing for you. But hardly ever they need engaging story and relationship. Maybe there is like, one or two vendors you remember, they've got very cool backstory or gimmick, but for most of the time it's like skip, 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 free swords, skip, 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 20 gold coins, skip, skips, thank you, bye. You don't need anything extra and fancy, because it's just wasting resources. It's not the purpose of the NPC. I'm not going here to listen about your problems with your wife. I don't give a fuck. I want my silver sword from high mountains, because I already collected 100 gold coins. Give me the sword and shut up. Yeah. And the last type, the most versatile from my experience and the most rewarding for players. And actually, the most expensive and the cheapest to design, because on one hand, yes, you need all these bits to create the whole image of the NPC. They have to have very nice backstory, some depth, some design. They are not just, a face behind the in table serving you. They should have some ways to impact your gameplay. Maybe they're supporting you, maybe they are teaching you skills, maybe they are your mentor, whatever. They are quite often guiding you through the game, like, yeah, I know we went there to take part about your super serious problem, but now we have to go to Act 2, so please follow me. This is like this very cool village we have to visit. And also, since they are quite often sticking with you for a very long time, it's really nice to have some kind of relationship for them. It's balanced in different ways. Different kind of multi-purpose NPCs need those ingredients in different proportions. But at the end of the day, yes, it's more pricey to create one NPC containing all the bits of this design. But on the other hand, it may serve purpose, which otherwise you're going to cover by 5 different NPCs. So it's more pricey and more challenging to design such type of NPC and put it properly in the story and the gameplay. But on the other hand, at the end of the day, you've got only one NPC to test, one NPC to write, one NPC to voice over, one NPC to animate. So it's gonna be probably much more profitable for you, unless you're like very, very big company and you can afford throwing money to the fire and having multiple NPCs and testing them and everything. All right, since we sum up NPCs and what are their purposes, the most important thing I learned from LARPing ever is that it's all about fantasy. Because games are fantasy we can act out. It's not the fantasy we're reading about, it's not the fantasy we're seeing on the screen. We can actually perform the fantasy. I can be powerful. I can be wise or strong or independent. Whatever is your fantasy. And this fantasy can be very, very, very complicated, can be very, I wanted to say extraterrestrial, but that's not the word. They can be very mundane or the other way around. Maybe your fantasy is to have very small, cozy hut in the village and taking care about your cabbage. And this is the fantasy which is working for you. You're looking for it, and you're super, super happy. You can take care about your small cabbage, your rabbits, the sunset is beautiful. This type of fantasy is working for you, while for the other person, it may be the fantasy of power, a fantasy of love, fantasy of saving the world. We're different kind of people, and different kinds of fantasies are supporting our needs. And in the term, NPC's role is to support this fantasy. So I'm not here to be cool on my own. That's not a good design. It may be a good event. Maybe it's entertaining to watch this NPC do this or to engage in their story, but I should always help you make this fantasy more and more palpable. My role as an NPC is to be sure you're living your fantasy. So whenever you're designing NPC in video games, think about how the design of the NPC is enhancing the player's fantasy. Sure, sometimes we're breaking the fantasy, sometimes we need someone breaking the idea, because we want to later on show the player that yes, you developed even more, you were very weak, you failed, but there is still something in you. This is one of the primary things I learned from being a LARPer, both as a player, as an NPC. And for example, here at this photo, we've got Kuba, who has no idea about conducting. But he wanted very, very hard to play this crazy style Rococo conductor, composer. And the girl playing violin, she's an actual violinist. And he was pretending to conduct. He had no idea what he was doing. But she was trying to make his game, his day better, so he can act out his fantasy. Probably she wasn't even noticing because I believe it could be very destructive if you actually play the instrument and someone is showing you bullshit. But for him, it was like the best scene ever because he could stand in front of everyone in his fancy suit and pretend that he's conducting and someone is playing an actual awesome music. And everyone's watching, and his fantasy is fulfilled. And he was super, super happy about it later on. And I believe this is like what NPC should be doing, making players' experience unforgettable, enhancing it, and responding to the player's fantasy, to their needs. I also believe this is very bad placement for this, but fantasy is sometimes a need we'll never fulfill in real life. And those of you who played Baldur's Gate 3, you probably know Astarion. He's kind of sexy, a little bit pricky, full of himself guy, fancy hair routine, fancy pickup lines, all the red flags. Like, I may get this guy, for a beer to chat. I will never, ever even gonna, get him say anything romanceable in my direction. But games are fantasies, and this is like a psychological effect that quite often we're fantasizing because we need something, but we don't want to feel the fantasy. It's the expression, our inner expression, that we're lacking something, we're desiring something. But for example, in terms of sexual fantasies, people hardly ever enjoy them in real life. They have the idea that this is gonna be exciting or cool, and later on it's not their thingy. But it's nice to think about it and to, get this feeling that, oh, this is gonna be awesome. So yeah, in real life, no way, red flag. In games, well, hey, Astarion, do you have any plans tonight? You see, this is like this very lovely spot by the lake, and I'm wearing very, very little clothes right now, so maybe you wanna join. So sometimes you have to ask your players or think 2 steps in advance about what is their fantasy, and maybe they are not even expressing it entirely. Maybe there's something they would like to, but it's like, no, it's stupid. But NPC design must always support game pillars. So as much as I believe those guys, they could be like super cool NPCs. Lot of stories, wonderful backstory, wonderful character design. They are not fitting the setting. They are not fitting the game. Therefore, very bad design. And yeah, it's like, cool idea. Does it support our game pillars and players' fantasy? No. Then it's not good idea for our game. It's good idea for something entirely else. So we can also have to keep in mind if your NPC design is cohesive with the game design. Which very, very smoothly leads us to another thing. So coherence is the key element from my perspective in terms of designing an entity which is also interacting with you. Because you may have slightly incoherent, let's say, environmental design. I'm gonna watch it, walk around it, and it's like, something's off. But if I'm interacting with an NPC, and we know how other people talk, act, react, and the design is flawed, you're gonna spot it. And this is like, it's not mine, but this is like a very, very good summary of the thing I'm gonna talk in a minute. If you're trying to design as complex entity as an NPC, it's good to have coherent vision. So you not only have things which can fit together, not only things which fits and works together, but things which works together to fulfill an intention. And here's an actual example from the game I'm NPC'd recently. It's set in Wizarding World. It's non-profit LARP, and we're playing during first Wizarding World, which is like super grim and dark, and we're in Auror's Academy. And making long story short, we wanted to show players an actual quest, very complex one, about my character and my friend's character. We were playing siblings, and we have very dark family secret. The game, it has 4 episodes, so we have time to establish those things, which is also important. So we have complex, but not overly complicated backstory. And in that term, I mean that psychology of our characters, what they did and how it interlaces with each of the siblings. It makes sense in terms of their point of views, their psychology, and in general how humans work. We simplified it, not too much, so it's like very clear. Like, he's the older brother, I'm the younger sister, he's interested in this, I'm in that. Because it makes easier for us to create very clear patterns of behavior for those characters and to establish them to players. So like after the very first game, they were like, oh, you're this type of a person and you're this type of a person. And when they've got an idea of who we are, we started breaking the pattern consciously. We started very, very precisely leaving them breadcrumbs. So changing, there were like, tongue slipperies, events, letters, all the small signs that something is off. But since they knew already, they've got a vision who these people are, they can readjust the image to fit those new breadcrumbs to the vision they have. And later on, when they discovered this whole secret, they could resolve the story on their own. And our intention was to attract them to this family secret, not to stick the quest to everyone, like, hey, I've got very dark backstory, and maybe you're gonna listen about it. No, it's like, I established the character, you liked it, we have a relationship maybe, I'm teaching you, I'm mentoring you, and something's off. And because you're observant, you're looking for this kind of things, this intention to attract people work really, really well, because we managed to gather a few players around this quest, and later on, it was like super rewarding for them when they get to know the whole story, and later on they were also attached and involved in the mystery. Agency matters. That sounds super obvious, like choices and consequences and everything like this, but from LARP perspective, I learned that doing a thing is more rewarding than watching NPC doing it. Sure, you may have epic cinematics, and it's entertaining to watch them, but whenever you've got impact on a story, and at the end of the day is NPC resolving the thing, it's not as rewarding. I'm not sure if which one of Sherlock Holmes game it was, but I've got constant feeling that I'm playing Sherlock Holmes, and there's this Watson and the whole gimmick, the whole fantasy around this type of games, but the game is constantly Sherlock. I'm just observing how game is showing me, haha, you didn't know about it. Look, what a plot twist. So whenever you can engage players in doing things which make impact, it's super rewarding for them because they feel involved and they can, even if it's like super, super small thing, they feel that they have an agency, they change the story, and at the end of the day, it's about them, not about NPCs. NPCs are, for example, to deliver fancy setting for this thing, for this activity. NPCs are, for example, to explain what's going on, but if it's also players' work, it's like, I save the world. or we save the world, not I watch you saving the world. It's nothing funny and cool in watching someone saving the world and you just sitting here having fun. This is actually one of my favorites about expression. And what's different between expression and agency? In agency, it's all about how am I making impact to the world. But in terms of in expression, it's about how I'm, when I'm standing in terms of what's my position in this world, where are my views, what's important for me. And a very good example from a LARP was when we had to perform a ritual. There were two of us, two sorcerers, and we've got very limited and demanding spatial design. We had to someone put big group of players onto staircases leading to one place. And sure, we can tell them like, yeah, count to 2. But there is first no agency for players. It's NPCs telling them 1, 2, 1, 2. No cool, no fun. But we can't give them agency because it's gonna take ages deciding who's going on left or right. And my fellow NPC, she got a very good idea, and she told them, since it was connected with our backstories and our characters, all right, so whoever, rewind. So for those of you for whom love is the most important power in the world, please stand behind this NPC. And for those of you for whom power is the most important thing in the world, please stand behind her because you're gonna channel some shit. It's not important. It doesn't even matter if everyone stands here or there. We just wanted them to be here, to be present, to have feeling that they've got impact. But also, I saw that this very, from my perspective, unimportant decision, some people were seriously sweating, thinking, what's the most important thing for my character? Is it love or power? Because maybe something changed. How I'm gonna, react with the world. And it was like a very powerful moment from them, and a lot of players later on were telling us that it was super impactful for them. It was like a turning point. They realized things about their characters from design perspective, from story perspective. It wasn't as crucial, but for them, it was a way to express who their characters are and how they work, how they interact with the world. And here's an example from, I think, quite old game. I can't remember from which year it is. The Wrestling's Club. It's super major spoiler, but it's indie and it's old, so I believe it's not going to be a spoiler worth crying about. So for all the game, you're establishing 2 roles. You're a detective in a cyberpunk utopia, trying to solve some corporation big deal. And then you also trying to save your relationship. And you've got very, very, very last, the most important decision in the whole game, when they kicked you out from the window and you're falling down and you're calling your love interest, and you can only tell them one thing. They are trying to kill everyone, or I love you. And trust me, I was walking in a circus for 5 minutes like, what am I gonna do? This is insane. You can't force people to do things like this. And for me, it's like a very good example how you can combine expression and agency. I can express my love, or I can save the world. What's more important for me and why? Very, very short, because I know we're running out of time. This is actually designed for balancing conflicts on LARPs. If you've got more than one party and you want them not to be allies and ruin your conflict during the game, you can use so-called pentagram of relations. And the idea is that for A, here if you look at the colors, the allies marked on green are E and B, and sworn enemies are on the other side of the pentagram. And if you turn it, it's working the same way for all the other corners. And the idea is that if I'm A, And I'm in very good relationships with E and B, but they hate each other. I can never be allies with two parties at once. So they're never gonna overthrow someone. We're never gonna make an alliance which is gonna ruin the game because, for example, one family or one gang is trying to fight with everyone else. Because if it's designed well, they're never gonna make such strong alliance. And if your gameplay is conflict-driven, your story is conflict-driven, you can use this tool to balance it in a way. And I'm not sure if we have time, but very, very briefly, if you're doing research and looking for inspirations, it's always about what context, what information about this character, their occupation, the time they were living, the geographic region, what's important for their psychology and their behavior, what are struggles in this context, how you can utilize them in your design to make more believable characters. But please remember, not all things which are worth researching, they are playable and they translate very well to game design or story design. Because there's something called the Tiffany problem or the Tiffany effect, which is the tension between historical fact and the average everyday person idea of history. So if I put a Tiffany girl's name in medieval story, you're gonna tell me it's too modern. While actually, Theophania is named from 20th century and is more historically accurate than a lot of so-called medieval names. But in our perception of the story, the, let's say, pop culture perception, it's not working because it's too historically accurate and realistic, and we're used to pop culture version of history. Last but not least, whenever you're struggling with design of your NPC, try to impersonate this character. Try to say aloud the dialogues, think what you're gonna do in this context, how you're gonna act out. Just if this character is fierce and strong, but they love, I don't know, their dog or their mother, and someone killed the dog or the mother, what are you gonna do? Am I gonna sit and cry, or am I gonna go and kick some asses? And if you're not familiar or not fluent with impersonation, you can, there's like a few ways to be better in it. You can take part in improv or improvisation theater activities. They're quite popular and probably free, and you can just be a spectator and then join later on if it's comfortable for you. You can play pen and paper RPGs, although here you're mostly descriptive, you're not acting out usually. And of course you can join LARPing, which I recommend, but I also believe it's not the activity and the fandom for everyone, because it's basically about acting out, impersonating someone else, and interacting with the world and the people. It can be very intense, very emotionally draining or physically draining, but you can always see and check if it works. Thank you once again. Sorry for the technical inconveniences. Thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. 5 minutes.
We have questions?
I have one question or rather a comment, because you said there is no one universal rule for designing NPCs. I think I wouldn't agree, because I think there's one very important thing that applies to every NPC. You have to make him somehow interesting and memorable. And this is the problem which is in battle LARPing called the problem of Hans number n+1. You know what I mean?
Your friendly Sven.
Exactly. And if nobody remembers characters who are nobody, and you can't recognize them, how would you comment that?
How I would comment on the fact that all the NPCs should be memorable. I would say it depends on how big is their role in the story and in the gameplay, because if you've got a vendor and they are the not most important vendor in the story. There you have no quest connected. You may need a gimmick for them. Like this is old lady style vendor. And it's enough that she's speaking in some manner, she's dressed in some manner, but you don't need to make everyone super memorable because I believe that players may also get lost. So who's important? Where's the quest? So I would argue that not always you need to make them, they should be distinctive, but not always memorable.
Someone else want to ask something too? I think it's all. Thank you, Ola.
Thanks so much.